Russia launched a large-scale aerial assault on Kyiv with roughly 500 drones and 40 missiles, killing at least one person and injuring dozens, just before Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's planned meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump. The strikes damaged residential buildings and energy infrastructure, leaving parts of the capital without heat and electricity during freezing conditions. Ukraine condemned the timing as a deliberate signal aimed at undermining diplomatic momentum. What makes this strike especially alarming is its timing, hours before high-level political talks, suggesting Moscow is using battlefield escalation as a negotiating weapon. The scale of the attack reinforces fears that Russia is testing how far it can push militarily without triggering a stronger international response. This was not just a strike on Kyiv, it was a strike on diplomacy itself. For many observers, it signals that Moscow now sees escalation itself as leverage. The message appears calculated: pressure first, talks later, if at all. For Ukraine's allies, the attack raises an uncomfortable question: how much escalation is still being tolerated? At stake is not only Ukraine's security, but the credibility of deterrence itself. Following the Russian assault, Ukraine's largest private energy provider restored power to over 1 million households in the Kyiv region. Despite the progress, scheduled outages remain in place, with emergency blackouts continuing in several districts as crews rush to stabilize the grid. The rapid restoration highlights Ukraine's resilience, but also exposes how vulnerable civilian infrastructure remains to sustained aerial pressure. Energy warfare has become a central front in the conflict, aimed at exhausting the population rather than achieving quick military gains. Every blackout now serves as a reminder that winter is being weaponized. Civilian endurance, rather than battlefield movement, is increasingly becoming the deciding factor. Behind the front lines, survival itself has become a daily act of resistance. The longer the lights stay off, the louder the message of intimidation becomes. Russian President Vladimir Putin stated that Moscow will pursue its objectives by force if Ukraine refuses peace on Russia's terms, declaring that interest in Ukrainian troop withdrawals from occupied territories is reduced to zero. He pointed to Russian advances in Donetsk and Zaporizhia as proof the war strategy is working. The statement signals a hardening position in Moscow, effectively closing the door on compromise in the near term. Analysts warn this rhetoric prepares Russian domestic audiences for a longer, more destructive phase of the war. The message from the Kremlin is clear: endurance, not negotiation, is the strategy. It also signals that Moscow is prepared to absorb mounting costs rather than adjust its demands. By framing time as an ally, the Kremlin is betting the world will eventually look away. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un praised deepening ties with Russia in a New Year's message, describing the relationship as bound by blood, life, and death. The comments reflect expanding military cooperation, including North Korean troop involvement in support of Russian forces. This public declaration elevates the conflict beyond Europe, drawing in authoritarian allies and reshaping global power alignments. Western officials fear the partnership could accelerate weapons transfers and prolong the war's intensity. What began as a regional war is increasingly taking on global dimensions. Each new partner increases the risk that this conflict spills far beyond Ukraine's borders. The battlefield is widening, even if the front lines are not. Ukrainian forces reportedly repelled Russian advances near contested towns such as Myrnograd and Hyliapol, even as heavy artillery and drone exchanges continue across the front lines. Ukraine's air force remains active, countering attacks while supporting ground offenses. The fighting shows neither side is gaining a decisive breakthrough, locking the war into a grinding battle of attrition. As both armies absorb losses, pressure is mounting for strategic shifts rather than incremental territorial gains. This battlefield stalemate may prove as deadly as any major offensive. In this phase of the war, time itself has become a weapon. And for civilians caught between strategy and survival, every passing day carries its own cost.